All right, we're back in the Environmental Lab podcast. As always, my name is Mike Gaumer. I'm the host. We're brought to you by LIMS Plus. I have a very special guest today who I am actually having my first conversation with, but I learned about her because I'm trying to expand my network in the field of water testing and environmental lab stuff. And so I found her on LinkedIn because she was putting out really cool content that I enjoyed and thought was relevant and was a pleasure to read, which is not something that's all that easy, but she's very good at it. Please welcome Executive Director at Rogue Water Lab, Chelsea Boozer. Chelsea, how are you?
Yeah. Hey, Mike. I'm excited to be having the first conversation with you. And it's just, that's a funny intro because I get all the time like, Chelsea, you're everywhere. And I was like, no, I just know how to post on LinkedIn. So
that's a powerful skill. That is a powerful skill. And it seems like you're everywhere. I'm like, wait a second. How is she at both of these conferences that are happening at the same time in different locations? But there you are smiling with everybody and posting great content about it. So I want to learn about what you're doing. Tell me about what Rogue Water Lab is and kind of your responsibility there.
Yeah. So Rogue Water Lab is a nonprofit, communications focus. Its mission is really to bolster public trust in water and sustainable water solutions by bringing communities together through better communication. So if you think about the water industry and really like a lot of governmental industries, historically, we don't communicate well. We don't tell our story. The public doesn't really know what we do. They really don't trust us, right? And, you know, the water industry has even more challenges to that because all of our assets are underground. So I always tell people, talk to your neighbors, the people who are in the water industry, talk to your friends. Do they even know how water gets to their house? Like, ask them to describe that process. And people know very little about that. And because we do provide a good service, you turn on your faucet, you flush your toilet, it comes in, it goes away. And people, the majority, have really good experiences with that. And so we've just missed this opportunity of connecting with the public and with other stakeholders, you know, the business community. Water keeps our economy flowing. Hospitals, schools, businesses couldn't run without it. With policymakers, you know, have we really done a good job engaging them on the importance of water to public health and, again, to the economy and keeping their community going, to quality of life? And so Rogue Water Lab is really just all about how to up the water sector's kind of ability to be able to do that through equipping, inspiring, empowering them to better engage all stakeholders.
I love the mission. It is so important, and I take it for granted. And I am in the business. You know, I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and you know, as a parent, I've become more conscious about what they're eating and what they're drinking and what they're breathing and all those things. But still, I just have this trust and this belief that the water that comes out of my faucet or my fridge is good for me to give to them. But truly, I have no idea what goes into that. At least I didn't have any idea what went into it. And so now all this PFAS stuff comes out. And now I'm listening to normal television or normal podcast or whatever. And all of a sudden people are talking about PFAS and how I should be concerned with it. And it gives me a little bit of anxiety about, man, maybe I should have been safer about this. I'm on a city water system. So how do you think is the right way for consumers to get information that they can trust and should use versus, you know, where's the right place for them to learn, I guess?
Yeah, there's so much to that question, I think. You know, there's so much to that. I think one thing that I thought of when you were talking is another thing for our sector and water providers, so like utilities, and everyone involved in between to know is if we're not telling our story, someone else is. And right now, you're right. Everything on the news is about lead pipes. They're saying lead in water, and we're not correcting and saying, hey, there's no, like, water didn't leave the plant with lead in it, right? There are lead pipes, and that's the issue. And there's a distinguishment through that and through PFAS. You know, for consumers, it's hard. There's something called like news literacy. So I'll pause here and say my background is journalism. And I was a journalist for 8 years before I ever joined the water sector. And I have a lot of passion around that and having like an informed electorate. And we have issues with that in the US and in the world on just the ability to know what's fact and what's fiction online. I'll say, I would really like to see, a future where our communities trust what their utilities are saying and reach out and ask questions. But I am understanding that we've also got to get to a spot where our utilities are communicating, and we're not.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna. That was gonna be my question. Do you feel like utilities are putting that information out? Maybe that's kind of what you all are giving them the tools to be able to do. And I'd like to hear more about that. But obviously I just think about my own experience, and when I think about what's in the water that I'm giving to my kids, it doesn't pop into my head that, I should call my utility service here in Maryland and ask them. So do you think there's opportunity for utilities to be I guess more active in how they're communicating?
Yeah, I think there's a ton. And honestly, because there's not a good answer to your first question of where should consumers go, there really isn't this website or this database. Now, there are some out there, and some of them are like fear mongering and like I wouldn't recommend. But me being in the industry and knowing the experts and knowing what's wrong about that information, I can discern, but could the average person? And so I think it does go to your point. There's so much opportunity. We have got to do a better job of just talking to people about hard topics and technical topics. The other thing we're not good at in this industry, historically, it's been made up of a lot of engineers who have a certain level of expertise, and then construction type, like utility in the field type people. Not a lot of communicators. This is very new.
And scientists.
Right.
That's the third one, and that's it, right? And that's where my relationships come in too. It's like, they want to do science, and I don't blame them, because I want to do what I'm good at as well. And that may not be writing, something for a general consumer to read about what I think they should be doing or what they should know about.
Or thinking of, one of my biggest pet peeves, I always say, people think because they can talk, they can communicate. And that's not true. There's a strategy to communications. There are degrees in communications and public engagement, all these things. And we really need to build up these positions in the water sector to help scientists to get the hard data from these scientists, engineers, that kind of mindset, and be able to communicate that to our customers and to our end users. And there's strategy involved in that. And so, that's something, Rogue Water is passionate about helping people do.
And there's budget too. So who should be responsible for that? Like, is that the state level, or who should be coming up with? It's not like we can ask these engineers, and scientists to just start doing this. There's got to be, like you said, a plan and a strategy to be able to do it. And every time you talk about that means there's got to be budget. So who could come up with this, and why would they come up with it? How do they get those dollars assigned to them to be able to execute on it?
Yeah, here's something I'll say to that I always counter to that. You always get that question. I work a lot more with utilities than like the lab or the company. Although, I work with different companies in the water sector too. A lot of times I'm talking to utility leaders and they mention resources and I can't hire a person. One thing I'll say is that we all need this skill set. So even if you don't have the budget currently to hire a dedicated person to think through the strategy and these templates and these plans with you, go get some training. Rogue Water Lab puts out training. There are other places in the industry. Go to communications track when you're at one of these big water conferences and just get a little bit of strategy, because we all need this throughout all our skills. The other thing I challenge people is, if we recognize enough that communications is important and it has butterfly effects to all the other challenges we're trying to address with our solutions, then we better start putting some money behind it. And I tell this story, I'm actually about to get the state wrong, so I'm gonna leave out the state. But there's this utility who was doing this project, and they didn't, with different funding and different governmental things, you have to meet certain requirements. Public engagement, public meetings are one of those. They just kind of said whatever, not really worried about that piece, because they're the experts. They were doing a good job on the project. Well, some citizens group got together and decided, because they didn't know what was going on. They wanted to know what was going on. They didn't fully understand it, and they decided to sue. Long story later, or short story, whatever I'm trying to say, this ended up costing $10 million, this lawsuit. And I can't remember the exact years, but at least 4 or more years, like a delay in the project, no telling how much that delay costs. So not communicating does cost you money. So, you know, one thing, yes, it takes budget, but we've got to start investing.
There's you know, consumers can have great reach now. I mean, with all the social media stuff, there's this guy, you know, I'll come back to Maryland. Maybe you are aware of him because of the, you know, what you do for a living, but there's this young man named Luke McFadden who's got like he's a fisherman who lives in Maryland on the Chesapeake, and he fishes crabs. And anyway, he's gone viral several times on TikTok and Instagram and all these things. But what he's doing now is he's really an activist for clean water. So he's in the Chesapeake Bay, which has plants around it, and finds that there's how it's impacting his water, and he takes videos of it, and he goes out right on the water and he shows, look, this is waste from that plant that is in the Chesapeake Bay, and it impacts these fish, and it impacts my you know, my well-being, because this is where I get it from. And who he's reaching is very different than who used to get reached by that stuff. And those people are, you know, that pisses people off, and it's really close to home. And that's what makes people want to stand up and say, hey, do something about this. And the way you do something about that is you vote differently. And nobody who's getting elected, at least that I hear from, is talking about that stuff. So it's challenging to decide how me as a consumer can vote in the direction I want to influence those things. And I wish someone was grabbing a hold of it more, like Rogue Water, and being more forward and direct to me about what things are going on and what it should be. So
and that's also a really good example of something I meant to say earlier, is that it's an example of how communications is not just about communications and how it influences all these other challenges and problems we're trying to solve, right? That's really about policy and then operations, right? But he was able to impact that through better storytelling, connecting with people, evoking emotion. And so, you know, in the kind of water industry, environmental space, specifically water industry is what I focus on. Workforce is a big thing. We have, you know, 30% of the workforce retiring in the next few years. You know, we call it the silver tsunami, but we're not attracting new talent. We're not attracting diverse talent. And when we do, we're not retaining them. Why? Because we're not, like, no one knows what we do. No one knows these are cool jobs. Same thing about infrastructure and funding and affordability. It's all because we're not communicating. We're not engaging right.
It's so true. You're exactly right. There's no information out there about it. Now, let me ask you, because I know that you are putting information out. I came on the latest thing that I saw on LinkedIn was this picture of a person, I think it was a young woman holding a golden ticket, very excited, because something with this golden ticket had to do with an invitation to the Catalyst experience.
Yes.
What in the world is that?
Yeah. So, you know, Rogue likes to do things differently because, again, our whole like MO is shaking up the industry, revolutionizing the industry around better communications. We put on this thing called Catalyst. It's not a conference. It's a professional development accelerator. And because it's not a conference, like, we really do different things to, yes, there's learning. Yes, you're going to leave equipped, but we're going to engage you through experience. And so this is the first year. We're calling it the experience. We've always just called it Catalyst, but it's the Catalyst experience. And you're really going to immerse into a new world when you come. This year's theme is a world of pure imagination. You're going to live in that world the whole time. We are journeying through the pillars of public trust and engagement. So that's the content theme, but we're doing it in really fun, interactive ways. And at the end, guests, we call them guests because this is not a conference, so we don't have attendees. We have guests, and I'm the host. I have a co-host. We're really curating this for them so that at the end, they'll see this engagement and communication we're trying to preach and teach you to go back and do in your communities. We just did that with you throughout this whole experience. We modeled what we were teaching. So Catalyst is, it's super fun. Right now we do one a year, and they each have like different topics. This year, again, is on public trust. So that's what the golden tickets are about. Everyone got their golden tickets recently, and they're posting them online because they're excited about it.
And so you're taking water professionals, taking them out of that kind of daily work structure and putting them into a place where they can learn the communication stuff that you're talking about and that you're so good at, to then send them back and be able to be able to incorporate that stuff into their
Yep.
normal work life as well as their personal life. Feels like.
Yep. And, the idea around it was that there really aren't, this was started 7 years ago, and there weren't conferences and spaces for communication skills building in the water industry. But again, not doing it in the old boring way, changing up. So not doing it in kind of the conference way. The other question I get about a lot is, who is Catalyst for? And it's not just for communicators who, one, everyone's a communicator, so let me correct that. But it's not for people who just have that in their title. We have CEOs, general managers coming, CFOs, vice presidents of engineering. We have manufacturers, nonprofit, utility, scientists, academia. It really is for everybody, because these skill sets and engaging with community is important in all of our roles in this sector. So that's what.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when does it start?
It is October 16th or 18th in San Antonio. And we are sold out this year for 2024, but stay tuned, because, we're still figuring out what 2025 is going to look like. So there's more opportunities.
Okay, great. So let me ask you this then. I love that. I love how you're creating awareness around it. And I hope I really wish you the best and hope it's super successful. And I do want to keep in touch to understand how it comes next year, because everyone needs to be able to do this skill. Shifting gears a little bit, I know you're an entrepreneur at heart. Arkansas Water YP Network. I saw that on your LinkedIn as something that you're also currently doing. What is the background on that?
Yeah, I'm so excited to tell you about that. So this is for the young professional space. So I myself am 33. In the water space, they define young professionals, anyone 35 and under. So a couple of years ago, I was probably 29 or so. I was a manager. I used to work at a utility, Central Arkansas Water, and I was kind of like on the executive team. I went to managers conferences. I went to all the like local statewide water conferences, got to be really engaged and got all the value from that. One, building my network, knowing people to call when I did government affairs. So when I was trying to build a solution or build a consortium around a different specific policy, I had that network and I had these benefits that we all know from going to conferences. But what I was seeing is that other people my age and a little bit younger than me and newer to the industry weren't getting the same benefits, either weren't getting sent to the conferences, were too scared to ask to go to the conferences. And then I was involved on the national level of the American Water Works Association and seeing the benefits of plugging into their YP groups. Arkansas didn't have anything like that. And so I kept reaching out. We do have like 3 different associations, though, that had kind of like committees that they said were for YPs, but they weren't active. Long story short, I got them together and I said, we can literally just make something, guys. And so one day I just created a Facebook page and I said, this exists. It's called Arkansas Water YP Network. And next thing you know, we started off meeting in Central Arkansas, which is the center of the state, kind of easiest to do. It's where I'm from. We had 30 people at our first meeting in June 2021. Now it's grown. It has a whole board. I've even like handed it off. There's a chair and everything. So I'm just kind of the advising founder. We have monthly meetings in 4 areas of the state. We are funded. People fund us. So yeah, it's had a lot of impact, honestly. I'm almost feel like a grandma watching it. I have these like proud moments of looking and seeing the impact it's had on people in their careers and getting them involved and kind of feeding the associations that already existed. So yeah, that's what the network is.
You are a doer for sure, Chelsea. You've got this energy that I understand why people want to follow you and why you're successful at building these things. So congratulations on that. We are coming up on time. Before we go, where do people follow you and where do people follow Rogue Water Lab? Should we be looking on Twitter or LinkedIn or email? Tell me where the best place to catch up and stay in touch is.
So LinkedIn is my space. I encourage you, please get on LinkedIn. So you can find me at Chelsea Boozer on LinkedIn. You can find Rogue Water Lab at Rogue Water Lab on LinkedIn. Rogue is also on X, which used to be called Twitter, and it's on Instagram. Just not as active on there because LinkedIn is the space where I really engage. But if you really want to find out more about Rogue Water Lab and engage in maybe some opportunities coming up or some trainings we do or like ask more questions, you can go to roguewaterlab.org. Sign up for the newsletter, look around the website, see what different offerings they are. So yeah, I definitely encourage people to do that.
The signing up for the newsletter on Rogue Water Lab, as someone who does it, it is not the same old boring newsletter. It's always fun. It's always interesting. It's always short enough where it's not overwhelming. So I also would encourage you to do that. Chelsea, we're going to sign off here. Thank you so much for coming. I really love your mission. I hope people get behind you, and I wish you a ton of success in everything that you do. Thanks for coming on the Environmental Lab podcast. I appreciate you being here. It's so nice to meet you, and I can't wait to see you at one of the events. And by the way, my request to anybody impacting, having the impact you are, is that coming into this space, the acronyms for all these events is overwhelming. And it took me a full year to figure out what AWWA is and what this one is and what that one is. So I'm going to, if I can make a request, it's going to be that you maybe help simplify that process so I know exactly what's going on and where it is.
Yeah, the acronyms are a big thing, but yeah, thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me on, and definitely having me on as a communicator kind of in this space is a little different maybe than some of your guests. So I've really appreciated it and enjoyed the conversation.
I love it, Chelsea. Thank you so much. Happy Friday. Have a good one.
Thanks.